Hey guys, tonight we begin somewhere quiet up in the misty Ethiopian highlands, just before the sun knows what to do with itself. You're wrapped in a coarse wool blanket, not exactly cozy, but enough to keep the chill from creeping through your bones. Somewhere out there in the deep gray of pre-dawn, a goat bleats. And in the little village hut behind you, someone's already grinding something in a stone bowl. You know what it is. Beans. Dark little secrets inside crimson cherries. Coffee. You probably won't survive this. By the way, not because it's dangerous, but because you're about to spend the day doing the kind of slow, repetitive labor that would make modern desk work look like a car chase. Still, it's beautiful. The kind of quiet beauty you can only appreciate when there's no inbox, no notifications, and absolutely no one trying to sell you supplements. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint toward the edge of the village, where the fog curls over the grass, like it's reluctant to leave. The air smells of ash, sheep, and something green like cracked twigs and raw stems. You're up before most of the others, and definitely before the sun, but that's normal. Here in 9th century Ethiopia, life begins early. There's no snooze button on the rooster. The woman grinding beans isn't making coffee yet. First, she separates the cherries from the seeds by hand, of course. She soaks the cherries in water that's slightly too cold to be pleasant, pops them with her thumbs, and rubs the slimy fruit away from the little twin beans inside. They look more like pebbles than anything delicious. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't scowl either. Just work, rhythm, and breath. Historians still argue whether coffee was first consumed as a brewed drink here in Ethiopia or further north, in Yemen. What they agree on, though, is that Ethiopia is the original home of the coffee plant Coffea arabica. Wild shrubs still grow in the region's forests, as if nature herself needed a caffeine fix. Your job this morning is simple. Carry water. Not from a tap, obviously, but from a narrow stream down a slope where the rocks tried to break your ankles at least twice. The clay jug is heavy when it's full and awkward when it's empty. But the walk is peaceful. Birds chirp half-heartedly, like they, too, are still stretching. A dog trots ahead of you, tail up, ears alert, possibly convinced it's hurting you like one of the goats. When you return, the beans are being roasted over an open fire on a flat black pan. The smoke curls up and tickles your nose. You try not to cough, but you do because you're a human and not a perfectly composed village elder. The woman raises one eyebrow in a way that feels both ancient and eternally familiar. She stirs the beans slowly, letting the skins crack and pop. They darken from a pale green to brown, then to an oily, almost black shine. The smell hits you somewhere behind your eyes, sharp, earthy, just a little burnt. If your alarm clock at home smelled like this, you'd never hit snooze. Here's a weird little detail. In some Highland villages, people didn't initially drink coffee. Instead, they chewed the beans raw or mixed them into a paste with fat and spices, like an ancient, crunchy energy bar. Tasty? Probably not. Effective? Absolutely. You can hear others stirring now, babies fussing, goats bleating, someone knocking a clay bowl off a ledge with a muffled curse. The village is small, few dozen people maybe, and built for function, not style. Mud walls, thatched roofs, doors that groan with every breeze. Yet there's a kind of elegance to it. In the way the sun slowly lights the edges of everything, the roasted beans are dumped into a mortar and crushed with a long wooden pestle. It's not subtle work, it's more thwack than grind, but the rhythm is oddly soothing. You take a turn. Your first few hits are clumsy. The woman sighs so softly it might have been a breeze, then adjusts your grip. Like this, she says, and your arms finally understand the motion. There's no electric grinder, no digital scale, no ceramic pour-over cone named after a Nordic furniture brand. Just beans, fire, and hands that know what they're doing. When the grounds are ready, they're added to a jebmina, a small, round-bellied pot made of black clay with a long, narrow neck and a spout like a duck's beak. It's placed directly onto the fire, and soon bubbles begin to whisper from inside. The brew is thick and dark, like river mud, only it smells infinitely better. You're not allowed to drink it yet. First, it must sit. Then it must be poured not in one big gulp, but in 3 rounds, each with a different name and level of formality. The first is strong and bitter, the second smoother, the third almost symbolic. It's more than a drink, it's a ritual, a moment of togetherness, a morning anchor. You sit with the others in a loose circle. No chairs, just woven mats and sleepy eyes. The air is warmer now, touched by sun. The woman pours slowly from high above, letting the liquid arc like a ribbon into small, handle-less cups. You take one, nod your thanks, and sip. It's strong, earthy. There's a hint of smoke and something like dark fruit. You won't admit it, but your brain does feel clearer. After, maybe it's the caffeine. Maybe it's the quiet. Historians still debate how widespread coffee use was in 9th century Ethiopia. Some argue it was limited to local rituals and didn't spread widely until later. Others think the seeds of the global addiction were already planted. Pun fully intended. You finish your cup. The goat from earlier noses your knee, probably looking for a bean. You pat its head and watch the steam curl from your empty cup, and just like that, the day begins. The goat herder's name, if you ask around, is Kaldi, or at least that's how the story always starts. You hear it whispered between sips, murmured by grandmothers with smoke-stained teeth, and even told by merchants who can't quite keep a straight face. But everyone loves the tale, even if no one entirely believes it. Kaldi, so the story goes, was a young goatherd living in these very same Ethiopian highlands sometime around the 9th century. You imagine him now, skinny, barefoot, with a stick twice his height, poking at goats that seem entirely uninterested in being poked. His herd, normally sluggish and half asleep, suddenly begins to bounce and butt heads like caffeinated toddlers. They leap around with suspicious energy, even pulling off a few mid-air twists that would qualify them for the ancient goat Olympics, if such a thing existed, and honestly, why not? Kaldi watches bewildered. This is not normal goat behavior. He narrows his eyes, then spots the culprit, a cluster of small red berries from a shrub none of the goats had touched before. He picks one and rolls it between his fingers. The skin is smooth, the shape oddly familiar. Those are coffee cherries. Tempted, Kaldi tastes one, then another. And soon, he's allegedly dancing right alongside the goats. Is any of this true? Historians still argue whether Kaldi ever existed or if he was stitched into the story later by people who just really wanted their coffee to have a charming origin myth. One theory suggests the Kaldi tale didn't appear in writing until centuries after coffee had already taken root in the Islamic world. But hey, goats doing somersaults? That's narrative gold. You meet a few modern goats as you wander the nearby hills. They're not exactly breakdancing, but they do seem unnaturally focused on a particular patch of shrubs. One of them looks at you like it knows a secret. You decide not to eat anything it's eating. Just in case. The call detail, true or not, signals something more important. Early humans didn't just stumble upon caffeine, they noticed it. They paid attention to how plants changed their animals, and then, slowly, how those same plants changed. Them. That's the sleepy genius of premodern people. No spreadsheets. No lab coats. Just patience, observation, and a willingness to choose suspicious berries as the sun climbs. You find yourself helping to gather more of those red cherries. It's not glamorous. The shrubs are dense, the branches snag at your sleeves, and your back complains almost immediately. You try to whistle to pass the time, but the local elder gives you a look that suggests your whistling is not historically accurate. You stop. During breaks, someone offers you a different kind of stimulant leaf chewed in parts of East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. You politely decline, unsure how many substances your time-traveling stomach can handle. They laugh and call you soft, but with a smile. You sit on a rock, watching someone else roast the beans this time. The aroma is stronger now, maybe because your nose is finally adjusting to the constant mix of fire, earth, and sheep. It's during moments like this that you start to appreciate just how communal this entire process is. Coffee isn't just about the buzz, it's about togetherness. You harvest together, roast together, grind together. If one person messes up the roast, the whole batch is ruined. If the pot cracks, you all wait for another. It's slow, yes, but deeply human. Another fringe tale you hear is that early Ethiopian tribes would mix ground coffee with animal fat, rolling it into small, high-energy balls for warriors to carry. Sort of like an ancient power bar, minus the packaging and the suspicious vanilla flavoring. Whether that actually happened is debated, but considering the altitude, the terrain, and the long days spent herding goats across hills, you can see the appeal. A quiet moment falls over the village as another round of coffee is poured. The second brew, Tona, is a little less bitter than the first. You've earned it. This one's smoother, easier on the tongue, with a mellow sweetness that surprises you. The villagers barely speak, but the silence isn't awkward. It's a held breath. A warm pause, and then someone mentions the monks. Apparently, across the Red Sea in Yemen, Sufi mystics have been brewing a very different kind of coffee. Word travels slowly, but it travels. Traders, pilgrims, and curious travelers speak of dark, potent brews used not for leisure, but for prayer. All-night devotion, powered by beans that once made goats pirouette. You picture them hooded, bearded men in stone chambers, chanting by candlelight as the hours stretch on. Coffee becomes not a snack, not even a drink, but a tool. A bridge between sleep and sacred. The idea of using a plant to stay awake on purpose still feels revolutionary in your sleepy village context. But it plants a seed. If you'll pardon the pun, you sip the last of your second cup and wonder what those Sufi monks would think if they saw you now, slouched against a tree stump, mildly caffeinated, half listening to a goat chewing a stick beside you. Probably they'd smile. Maybe offer you a third cup as the day begins to fade. The beans are gathered, roasted, ground, and brewed all over again. There's no waste. No rush. And for now, no global empire wrapped around the bean, just you. A few goats. And the quiet, strange little miracle of the coffee cherry. Later that evening, the wind shifts. It carries the smell of smoke and warm earth, but also something unfamiliar, a faint trace of cloves, maybe, or burning resin. You follow it, padding. Barefoot across the hard-packed dirt, past the goats who have, finally, worn themselves out. The sky is low and dark now, a stretch of ink splattered with stars so bright they almost seem fake. And there, inside a hut shaped more like a beehive than a home, the first true boil is happening. You duck under the low doorway, greeted by a swirl of steam and quiet concentration. It's warm inside, though not cozy think campfire in a closet. The roof has a smoke hole, but it's not doing its job particularly well. Your eyes sting slightly, your skin prickles, and yet you wouldn't leave for anything. In the center, a woman kneels beside the fire. Her hair is tucked under a linen wrap, her hand steady as she tends a small, blackened pot. You recognize it, the jabina. She's not making soup. She's making something else, and you can tell by the way everyone's watching. It's reverent, but not showy. The kind of attention usually reserved for births or eclipses. The water inside the pot begins to tremble. Not bubble yet, but it's thinking about it. The fire hisses as someone adds a bit of dried grass. You're handed a handful of beans roasted but not yet ground. You're invited to smell them, crush them slightly between your fingers. The scent is sharper than before, darker, almost chocolate. Now, here's the twist. She doesn't grind them. Not this time. Instead, she drops them in whole, just a small handful along with a pinch of something powdered and fragrant. Could be cardamom, could be crushed bark. You don't ask. You're here to watch, not interrupt. This is one of the earliest forms of brewed coffee, closer to a decoction than what you'd call a drink. And it's definitely not filtered. The water boils hard, then softens. The pot rocks gently on the firestone, and you realize everyone is breathing a little slower. Including you. Historians still argue whether early coffee was drunk for taste or effect. Some say it was medicinal, used for stomach aches, fevers, or spiritual cleansing. Others claim it was strictly utilitarian, a way to stay awake when the body begged for rest. Either way, this isn't your modern cafe latte. There's no latte. There's not even milk. Just hot water, charred beans, and the earthy perfume of the Highlands. As the pot simmers, someone taps a flat drum. A child hums. It's not performance, it's presence. The drink, when poured, is thick and a little gritty. You sip carefully. The first taste is confusing. Smoky, slightly sour, with a bitterness that makes your eyes widen just a little. You don't say anything. No one does. This is not a beverage to critique. This is a ceremony, a pause, a way of saying, we are here now and alive enough to sip something strange. Another quirky tidbit. Some of these early brews weren't even swallowed. People would hold the liquid in their mouths, swish it like mouthwash, and spit it out, a spiritual rinse. Others used the warm liquid to wash their hands or bless newborns. Coffee wasn't just for the tongue, it was for the soul, the body, the space. As the pot empties, you notice the fire beginning to fade. The shadows on the wall grow longer, softer. Someone sets the jabina aside to cool, careful not to crack the clay on the cold ground. These pots are precious. Hand-formed, low-fired, passed down. Everyone tells a story, even if it doesn't talk. You lean back against the wall. Your toes are warm. Your mind, ever so slightly buzzy, not jumpy, not wired, just aware, alert in a dreamy way, like that moment right before you fall asleep on a train. Across the fire, an old man is muttering something. You don't speak the dialect, but his hands make the story come alive. He mimics goats, monks, and something that might be a demon or just a bad batch of beans. Everyone chuckles softly. You try to smile without being noticed. It's hard to do both. The room begins to clear out slowly, one person at a time. No announcement, no clapping. Just a mutual agreement that the moment has passed. Someone yawns so dramatically it makes the baby laugh. You help gather the cups, careful not to spill the thick, muddy bottoms. Outside, the air has cooled again. The stars haven't moved, but you feel changed somehow, a little more ancient, a little more caffeinated. The kind of feeling you get after listening to a grandparent tell a story that makes no sense but still somehow explains everything. As you lie down on your mat, wrapped once again in scratchy wool, you think about boiling. About the way something raw becomes something more through fire and patience. It's not fast. It's not clean. But it's necessary. And tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again. You don't remember falling asleep, but now you're awake again barely. The world outside is still blue with early light, and someone's humming a tune that makes absolutely no sense but loops in your brain like the world's gentlest earworm. You stretch, wince at the soreness in your back, and step out into the cold breath of morning. Today, you're not in the Highlands. You've traveled across the Red Sea with traders who smelled like salt and goat leather, and now you find yourself in Yemen. Specifically, in a port town where stone buildings clutch the hillsides like barnacles and the air hums with incense and sweat. This is the 10th century. And you're about to sneak into a Sufi lodge where coffee isn't just a morning routine, it's a spiritual discipline. You duck through a narrow alley, brushing past hanging rugs and sleepy cats. Then, a heavy wooden door opens, just a crack. A voice beckons you in. You don't ask questions. You step into candlelight. Inside, it's cool and dim. A long room, lined with cushions, low tables, and men wrapped in robes that whisper with every movement. No one looks up at first. They're deep in something else. Recitation, repetition, breath and rhythm. You hear the low chanting of Sufi zikr, the repetition of divine names. But there's something else in the air too. Coffee. Thick, dark and steaming in copper pots, its aroma wraps around the chanting like a soft rope. One man pours the brew into tiny ceramic cups, his hands as steady as a surgeon's. The liquid is almost black, with just a trace of foam that flickers in the candlelight. A cup is passed to you. You sip. It's bitter, thick as syrup, and yet somehow clean. There's no sugar, no milk, just roasted clarity. It hits your tongue like a whisper and your spine like a tap on the shoulder, not a slap. Just a suggestion. Stay awake. Sufi mystics used coffee to remain alert during long nights of devotion. Not because they were chasing productivity, but because they wanted to be present, to chant longer, to feel deeper. Coffee became a tool for transcendence, not a prop for capitalism. One MAINSTREAM historical fact that gets repeated often, sometimes too often, is that coffee first spread through Yemen thanks to these Sufi orders. The port city of Mocha, yes, the Mocha, became synonymous with coffee exports. Not the chocolate coffee thing you buy at gas stations today, but a real place filled with ships, sacks of beans, and an energy that crackled just below the surface. Sit cross-legged among now, trying to breathe in sync, but mostly trying not to spill your cup. The brew here is boiled, not brewed like in Ethiopia. They call it kawa. The Arabic root of the word suggests to suppress, as in to suppress. Sleep, appetite, maybe even distraction. In some circles, they believe the Prophet Muhammad himself drank a version of it. Though historians still argue whether those stories are literal, symbolic, or just wishful thinking from caffeine enthusiasts. But here's the quirky bit. Some of the earliest critics of coffee thought it caused spontaneous laughter. Yes, laughter. Apparently, people would gather in these spiritual coffee houses, sip a little too much, and start giggling uncontrollably. Imagine being so sleep-deprived and caffeinated that you find divine enlightenment hilarious. You watch as one man begins to sway, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. The chanting deepens. Another joins him, then another. The rhythm becomes physical, and still they sip. You're invited to pour the next round. Carefully, slowly, keeping the grounds at the bottom of the pot. It's a small act, but you feel oddly honored. As if handling the drink requires something more than coordination like humility or stillness. You're not just holding caffeine. You're holding continuity. One scholar whispers to you that the Sufi coffee ritual may have developed as a counterbalance to the sleep-inducing effects of extended prayer. The body slumps, the spirit soars. Coffee keeps both tethered. Outside. The call to prayer begins to rise. You hear it filter through the thick walls, through shutters and gaps. It mixes with the fading chants like the end of a song. One by one, the men rise, roll their shoulders, and file out toward the mosque. Some take their cups with them. You linger. The pot is still warm. The embers still glow. And you realize this isn't just the story of a drink. It's the story of people trying to stay awake for the things that matter. Not emails, not deadlines, but devotion, connection, presence. You slip out the same door you entered. The alley is quieter now. The cats are gone, but your mind is lit up like a lamp. Not buzzing, just aware. Softly alert, somewhere behind you. Someone starts to hum again. You leave. Yemen with the smell of incense still clinging to your sleeves and cross back into the green hills of Ethiopia this time, deeper into the countryside. The air here feels softer, thicker with moisture, and the landscape rolls with terraces of grain and thick patches of coffee trees that grow wild, like they have better things to do than wait for permission. You're not here for stories this time. You're here to learn the sounds, because today you're grinding. You walk into a roundhouse with low walls and a straw roof, where 3 generations of women sit in a triangle. There's no fire yet, just a massive grindstone in the middle, the size of a pizza and twice as heavy. One woman hands you a wooden pestle, smoothed by years of use. Another tilts her chin toward the stone. Go on. You try. And fail. Because your first attempt sounds less like grinding and more like someone throwing a shoe at a wall. Everyone laughs, softly. One of the older women demonstrates, her arms moving with the slow grace of someone who's done this 10,000 times. The rhythm is hypnotic. Scrape, tap, circle, pause. A kitchen waltz, centuries old. The beans are dark and brittle, roasted that morning over a flat stone griddle. They fall into the groove of the stone like pebbles into a dry stream. You lean into the pestle, turning with your whole torso. Slowly, the beans become shards, then powder, then a kind of soft grit that smells like rain on warm bark. Historians still argue whether women exclusively held the role of coffee preparers in early Ethiopia or if it varied from village to village. But today, in this house, the division is clear. The men gather the wood, sure, but the women hold the ceremony. Once the grounds are ready, they're brushed into a shallow wooden bowl, shaped like a giant spoon. You help filter out the largest chunks using a sieve woven from dried reeds. It's imperfect but effective. A few stray pebbles remain. They don't worry about it. Neither should you. Now, on to the brew. There's a new jebin awaiting this. One smoother with decorative etching around the neck. It sits on a tripod of stones, cradled by glowing coals. A gourd of water is poured inside, followed by the freshly ground coffee. Then just as you're about to lean in a surprise, a clove. 1. Dropped in with all the ceremony of a priest ringing a bell. You glance at the woman who did it. She shrugs. For luck, she says, or maybe for warmth. Either way, it changes everything. The scent deepens. Grows spicier, darker. You feel it in your nose, then behind your eyes. The coffee begins to whisper again, tiny bubbles rising. Along the edge of the spout. You've learned not to crowd it now. The pot needs space. It's the elder in the room. It speaks last. While it brews, the youngest girl begins preparing cups. No two match. Some are chipped. One has a crack so thin you can barely see it. She wipes them with a cloth, then lines them on a mat in front of the fire. The mat is old. Hand-woven, the pattern faded to memory. And here's the curious thing, this ritual isn't rushed. Not ever. Even if the chickens are loose, even if the goats are yelling, even if there's a baby with a bad cough, coffee waits for no one, and yet everyone waits for it. You take your seat. There's no talking, not yet. The first cup, Abel, is poured high to cool and low to catch. The liquid shines like oil. You take it with both hands and sip. It's better than yesterday, but also worse. Not in quality, just in comfort, because it's new. You're still learning how to taste the silence that comes with it. Then someone speaks. Just one word, someone's name, followed by a pause. Then another voice. The conversation rises slowly, like steam, moving through gossip, questions, blessings, and the kind of passive-aggressive jokes only grandparents can make without consequences. By the time the second round is served, Tona, you're more relaxed. Your legs have gone numb, but your brain is humming. The coffee is lighter, smoother, a little cooler. Easier to sip without burning your tongue or your pride. Now for the quirky detail. In some villages, if you decline the third cup baraka, it's considered mildly rude. Not outrageously so, just enough to make people remember you didn't. Stay for the blessing, because that's what the third cup is. A closing note. A quiet wish folded into a swirl of grounds. So yes, you stay. You drink the third cup, even though you're a little over-caffeinated and seriously under-preppered for the heartburn. But you drink it because this isn't about coffee anymore. It's about witnessing the invisible thread that runs through fingers, mouths, clay, and fire. Historians still debate where the modern idea of a coffee break originated. Some point to Ottoman bureaucracies. Others say it was an American factory floor invention. But here, centuries before unions and HR policies, coffee is already a break. A pause with rules. A sacred disruption. The ceremony ends quietly. Cups are rinsed, mats are rolled. The coals are stirred once more, just to keep the warmth a little longer. You step outside, the cloves still lingering on your breath. The fields stretch ahead. And somewhere a goat is probably dancing again. The sun crests higher as you make your way downhill, away from the dense green of the Ethiopian uplands and toward a thinner ribbon of dry red dirt that winds its way toward the coast. You're traveling. Now not just physically, but through time and trade. The year is inching forward, slowly pulling you into the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries, when the bean, humble and dark, begins to stretch its influence beyond its cradle. You hitch a ride on a camel. Caravan, because of course you do. There's no espresso machine in sight, but there is a guy named Malik who can pack a mule in under 60 seconds while humming the same 4 notes over and over. He hands you a water gourd and a curious warning. Don't sleep tonight. We pass through bandit country. You try not to take that personally. The camels smell like old rugs and judgment. They snort every time you try to adjust your seat. But you're not here for comfort. You're here to follow the bean dot as the caravan lumbers toward Yemen's port cities. The rhythm of the journey becomes its own kind of lullaby. Sway, breathe, sway. Dust in your teeth. The occasional prayer. Call echoing through the canyon. By now, the demand for coffee has grown. Word has spread. Not just among Sufi mystics, but merchants, travelers, pilgrims. The drink has begun to ripple outward from the highlands and hills into trade routes that reach as far as India, Persia, and eventually, spoiler alert, Europe. But first, it must go to Mecca. Yes, that Mecca. Because what better place for a stimulating drink than the spiritual epicenter of the Islamic world? Pilgrims from across the region gather there, and as they return home, they carry stories, trinkets, and often coffee beans. Or at least roasted ones, since green beans weren't always allowed to travel beyond certain borders. Protectionist policies. They're not new. Historians still argue whether coffee entered Mecca through merchants or mystics. Either way, by the early 1500s, coffee houses, kava-khaneh, appearing across the Islamic world. Places where people gathered not just to drink, but to think. But before that, we reach the port of Mocha. Yes, like your favorite beverage, but without the chocolate and whipped cream. The real. Mocha is a bustling Yemeni port where sacks of beans are weighed, sorted, and shipped across the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. The smell here is incredible. Roasted coffee mingling with sea salt, fish oil, fermented dates, and wet rope. You try not to breathe through your mouth. You watch as green beans are measured by men with ink-stained hands. They're meticulous, arguing over moisture levels, origin, roast date. One man insists that Highland beans from Harar are superior. Another scoffs, citing altitude and soil as kingmakers. You nod sagely, pretending to agree, while quietly thinking you still don't fully understand the difference between a light roast and a medium roast. Here's a fun fringe fact. Some traders disguised coffee beans by rolling them in wax or coating them with ash to throw off customs agents. Others hollowed out books, stuffed them with beans, and hoped for the best. Caffeine smuggling centuries before airport security. You're invited to a small cafe near the docks, no bigger than a storage shed but filled with the sounds of dice, games, quiet debates, and spoons clinking against porcelain. The coffee here is stronger. It hits harder, brewed in deep metal pots and served with tiny, tooth-cracking sweets made from boiled sugar and cardamom. It's in this space, this dark and smoky little room, that the idea of coffee as a social lubricant begins to solidify. Men lean in to share gossip, poetry, and economic speculation. They argue about Persian politics, Ottoman taxes, and of course the best bean varieties. One recites a riddle. Another responds with a joke so dry you don't realize it's funny until 2 minutes later. You sip and sip again. The coffee isn't sweet, but the moment is. Still, not everyone's thrilled about this new bean-based social scene. Rumors reach you whispers that conservative scholars in Mecca and Cairo are calling for coffee to be banned. Why? Because people are staying up late. Because they're laughing. Because they're talking about ideas. Dangerous stuff. One mainstream historical fact. In 1511, the governor of Mecca did try to ban coffee, citing moral decay, sleep disruption, and public disorder. He shut down coffee houses, burned beans, declared them sinful. The backlash was swift. Religious scholars debated the issue with the same intensity you'd expect from a modern-day caffeine Reddit thread. Some argued that coffee was intoxicating, and therefore forbiddance. Others said it promoted wakefulness and focus during prayer, clearly a good thing. Still others shrugged and poured another cup. Eventually, the ban was overturned by higher authorities. Coffee survived. In fact, it thrived. But the episode revealed something profound. The bean had power, not just as a drink, but as a disruptor. Quirky side note, some clerics allowed coffee but banned the music in coffee houses. Apparently, caffeine was fine as long as no one was tapping their foot. Back in Mocha, you wander the edge of the docks where the ocean laps against stone piers, and sailors curse in a dozen languages. A boy sells you a handful of beans wrapped in cloth. You thank him, even though you already have beans in your pocket. It just feels right that the ships begin to depart. India, Cairo, Constantinople, Venice, and you? You follow the one bound north. The bean is moving. Fast dot, and you're not about to miss its next stop. The sea is not gentle. It slaps the hull of your ship like a disgruntled baker kneading dough, and you've spent the last hour trying not to revisit the extremely spicy lentils you had for breakfast. But your stomach is sturdy, your spirit curious, and your destination? Constantinople. Welcome to the mid-16th century, where the Ottoman Empire stretches across continents and its capital, perched at the edge of Europe and Asia, hums with traders, scholars, janissaries, beggars, and more cats than you've ever seen in one place. They're everywhere, lounging on rugs, dozing on rooftops, and occasionally sipping from unattended saucers of ... You guessed it, coffee. You disembark, wobbly but wide-eyed, into a city of tiled domes and endless conversation. You pass under arched gates, past the blue mosque still relatively new, and through stone alleys where market stalls overflow with spices, books, silks, and sweets sticky enough to pull a tooth straight from your jaw. You want all of it. But first, coffee. You find your way to a corner cafe, or rather, a café. Not quite a modern coffee shop. More like a smoky tavern with low wooden stools, brass trays, and a ceiling so stained with roast smoke it might qualify as its own flavor note. The air is thick with heat and storytelling. The Ottomans didn't just adopt coffee. They institutionalized it, codified it, elevated it. It becomes imperial. Within decades, they had official court coffee makers, kavesi bake, and dedicated coffee rooms and palaces. It's not just a drink. It's a sign of power, refinement, hospitality. The guy at the next table is sipping from a tiny cup so delicate it could double as a thimble. It's painted with gold leaves. He's reading something too, but upside down, possibly for effect. You're handed a cup. Ottoman-style coffee is strong, sludge-thick, unfiltered, brewed slowly in a small copper pot called a sezvi over low heat. Ground so fine it makes flour look gritty. No sugar unless you ask for it. No milk, no foam art in the shape of a swan. Just pure, tar-dark history. The grounds settle at the bottom like a tiny fortune dot, and here's the mainstream fact. By the mid-1500s, the Ottomans had embraced coffee with full, legal fervor. The first documented coffee houses in Constantinople opened around 1554, founded by two Syrian merchants. The establishments quickly became hubs for poets, scholars, and anyone who wanted to debate theology, write something mildly seditious, or play backgammon for hours without looking like they had a gambling problem. The quirky detail. Coffee became so central to marriage contracts that women could, in some cases, legally divorce their husbands for failing to provide it. Yes, no coffee equals no vows. Imagine explaining that clause at a modern prenup negotiation. You watch a man across the room perform tasseography reading fortunes from coffee grounds. He swirls the cup, flips it, lets it cool, then peers inside like he's reading the secrets of the universe. He gasps slightly, then laughs. Probably saw something juicy. You're tempted to try, but something tells you your future is already fairly caffeinated. Historians still argue whether these early Ottoman cafes were primarily secular spaces or if they carried religious weight. Some imams criticize them as sites of idleness and heresy. Others embrace the intellectual debate they fostered. What's clear is this: the coffeehouse became a stage for ideas, a pressure valve for the city's energy. You overhear a conversation about poetry, another about philosophy, and yet another about a local baker's mysterious third wife. All of it carried on in the same flat, mildly amused tone. It's like no one here gets truly excited, they just let their eyebrows do the work. Then there's the Coffee Vendors Guild, yes, an official guild. Like a union, but with robes and slightly more flair. They regulated who could sell coffee, how it was brewed, and even prices. If you overcharged, they could take your license. If your beans were moldy, they'd shut you down. Quality control, Ottoman style, but not everyone approved. There were periodic bans like the one under Sultan Murad IV in the 17th century, who, allegedly, took his dislike of coffee to brutal extremes. Legend says he would disguise himself and wander the city at night, personally punishing those caught. Sipping coffee after curfew, is that true? Historians still debate whether the story is apocryphal or exaggerated for dramatic effect. Either way, it gives coffee police a whole new meaning. Back in your cafe, the mood is lighter. A man offers you a date. Not romantically, just the fruit. You accept. It's chewy, sweet, the perfect companion to the bitterness in your cup. No one rushes here. You're allowed, expected, even to linger, to refill, to debate the weather as if it matters. As the fag vey sun dips behind the skyline, casting long gold light across minarets, someone begins to sing quietly in the corner. A nave flute joins in. It's haunting, but not sad. More like a memory with wings. You drink your last sip slowly, mindful of the grounds. They stick to the sides of the cup like soot from a dream. You tilt the cup, look inside, and think about asking someone to read it. But then again, maybe it's better not to know. You step outside. The streets are still humming, just a little quieter now. A boy walks past carrying a tray with 6 full cups, balancing it like a magician. A cat meows, unimpressed. Somewhere another pot is beginning to boil. And the bean? It's just getting started. You blink, and suddenly you're further north. The sea is behind you, replaced by cobbled streets, colder winds, and the unmistakable weight of European self-importance. It's Venice, now late 16th century, and coffee has arrived in Europe, clinging to ships like a clever stowaway. The sky here is heavier, the light more silver than gold. Canal waters slap lazily against old stone, and every building leans just a little, like it's trying to get a better look at the tourists it hasn't met yet. You step off the docks and into a city that thinks it's the center of the universe, which, for about 100 years, it kind of is. The first thing you notice is that people here don't seem entirely sure what coffee is yet. There's a merchant shouting about oriental elixirs from the Levant, holding up what looks like a sack of small, angry marbles. An apothecary nearby calls it kewa and claims it can cure melancholy, indigestion, and unwanted thoughts, though he also sells leeches, so you take that with a pinch of salt. In fact, For much of early European coffee history, this drink isn't found in cafes, it's in pharmacies. That's right. You had to go to the same place that sold ground-up beetles and powdered mummy to get your caffeine fix. A little less romantic than your neighborhood espresso bar. One mainstream fact: the first official record of coffee in Venice appears in the late 1500s, and for a while it's a luxury good, foreign, suspicious, but fascinating. The Catholic Church debates whether drinking it is a sin. Some clergy call it the devil's drink. Others argue that if it keeps people awake during Mass, it's probably fine. Historians still argue whether Pope Clement VIII truly baptized coffee to make it Christian-friendly, or whether that tale was just clever marketing by enterprising merchants who needed a papal PR boost. You're not sure, but the story goes like this. The Pope tries it, loves it, and declares that it would be a shame to let only the Muslims have it. This is possibly the most caffeinated example of religious diplomacy in history. You wander through a Venetian palazzo where an aging nobleman offers you a thimble-sized taste. It's bitter, a little burnt, and served from a heavy silver pot that seems better suited to holding soup than enlightenment. He sips slowly, pinky extended, like he's not quite sure if this counts as medicine or scandal. By now, you're craving a real coffee house, something like the ones in Constantinople. A place with laughter, news, card games, and too much smoke in the air. And in a few decades, you'll get your wish, because by the 1640s, Europe begins to build its own version of the coffee house. And while Venice was one of the first ports to import coffee, it's London, Paris, and Vienna that start turning the drink into a scene. But back in Venice, something quietly remarkable is happening. Coffee is becoming fashionable. Not just because of its taste, which Europeans are still getting used to, but because of what it represents: trade, curiosity, cosmopolitan charm, the quirky fact of the hour. Venetian women, wealthy ones, start serving coffee at afternoon salons alongside chocolate and snuff. It becomes part of the aristocratic theater of conversation. You sip, you gossip. You pretend your wig isn't itchy. A noblewoman in embroidered silk waves you over and whispers, "It tastes like ink, but everyone's pretending it's brilliant." You nod in solidarity. Peer pressure has never smelled so roasted. Street vendors, sensing opportunity, begin offering a cheaper version, served in chipped mugs, with a little sugar if you're lucky, and often boiled to the consistency of tar. Still, it sells, because by now the buzz has caught on. Coffee doesn't just wake up the mind, it excites the imagination. It makes people feel modern, awake, sophisticated, or, at the very least, less sleepy than they were 20 minutes ago. Venice, always good at adapting to a trend, leans in. Coffee begins appearing in plays, in poems, in coded love letters. The bean has become an accessory to flirtation and philosophy alike. And of course, someone tries to tax it. Venetian authorities consider a tariff on imported coffee to control its spread. But the merchant guilds push back. They see the future ships, lined with green beans, apothecaries turned baristas, and a city buzzing just slightly faster than before. So you sit, once again, on a cold stone step beside a narrow canal. A gondola drifts by, its oarsmen humming a tune that may or may not be about taxes. You sip from your tin cup, which might be soup, might be coffee. It's hard to tell, honestly, and listen as two students nearby argue over whether Aristotle would have liked coffee. You don't know. But you do know this. If Aristotle had tasted it, he probably would have stayed up all night writing even more syllogisms. The sun sets behind domed churches and ancient spires. Somewhere someone drops a sack of beans and curses in 3 languages. And you? You're wide awake. The bitter chill of a northern European winter bites at your cheeks as you arrive in Vienna, the early 17th century's newest coffee hotspot. The streets are quieter here, but under the heavy coats and powdered wigs, the city is waking up one small steaming cup at a time. You stroll through narrow alleys smelling of wood smoke and baked bread, the sound of horse-drawn carts crunching, over cobblestones mingling with the occasional sharp clatter of a dropped spoon. You're headed to the city's first official coffee house, which opened in 1683, shortly after a certain famous siege ended. Here's the mainstream fact. After the Ottoman siege of Vienna failed, the retreating soldiers supposedly left behind sacks of coffee beans. Viennese entrepreneurs quickly recognized an opportunity and turned these into the city's first coffee trade. Coffee houses sprang up, becoming places where diplomats, artists, and merchants gathered to talk politics, business, and importantly, drink coffee. Walking into the coffee house, you're greeted by the murmur of dozens of conversations, the clinking of delicate porcelain cups, and a faint haze of smoke and roasted beans. The air is thick but cozy. It smells like curiosity, old books and freshly baked pastries. The proprietor, a wiry man with a silver-streaked beard, hands you a cup brewed dark and strong, much like the city itself. You savor the bitter taste, noticing hints of chocolate and a subtle earthiness. Here's a quirky tidbit. Viennese coffee houses developed a whole culture around their patrons. Some regulars even had their own reserved seat, complete with a marked ashtray and newspaper. It was common for them to linger for hours, nursing the same cup of coffee, reading the news, and discussing the latest theater gossip. Historians still debate whether these coffee houses were the real catalyst for the Enlightenment spread in Central Europe or simply charming bystanders in the broader intellectual revolution, but it's clear they were vital social hubs, some calling them the universities of the common man. You overhear a heated discussion about the latest scientific discoveries, while a group nearby plays chess with furrowed brows. A poet recites a sonnet about the bittersweet nature of life and coffee, drawing a small crowd. A waiter places a plate of apfelstrudel in front of you, a sweet, flaky pastry perfect for balancing the strong coffee. You nibble thoughtfully, the layers of cinnamon and apple mingling with the bitter warmth of your drink. Interestingly, the Viennese also developed unique coffee specialties like the melon, a frothy mix of coffee and milk, an early ancestor of the modern cappuccino. The recipe, of course, varies by café, and everyone has a strong opinion on the right way to prepare it. You notice a curious detail. Coffee houses often had strict rules against gambling and political dissent, trying to keep things civil. But, of course, where there's coffee and conversation, some spirited debate is inevitable. A local tells you a story about a famous coffeehouse regular who was so obsessed with his brew that he once drank 10 cups in a row. An early example of what we might now call over-caffeination. He apparently fell asleep mid-discussion, sparking endless jokes. As the afternoon light dims, you find yourself lulled by the gentle hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, and the quiet scratching of quills on parchment. The coffee warms your hands, the pastry your mouth. Outside, the city lights begin to twinkle, reflected in the icy Danube. You take a deep breath, appreciating this moment in time where coffee is more than just a drink. It's a ritual, a connector, a reason to pause and gather with others. And you, dear traveler, are right in the middle of it. From the stately streets of Vienna, Your journey takes a sudden turn to the bustling markets of 18th century Cairo, where coffee isn't just a luxury, it's woven into the fabric of daily life. The call to prayer echoes gently across sandstone rooftops, mingling with the aromas of cardamom, spices, and, of course, coffee. You navigate through crowded bazaars where merchants haggle over bolts of silk, copper coffee pots gleam under the hot sun, and street performers entertain with delicate acrobatics. The city hums with a rhythm both ancient and alive. Here's a mainstream fact. Cairo's coffee culture dates back to the Ottoman period, but it evolved uniquely, blending local customs with imported traditions. Coffee houses, or kawa, are social hubs where men gathered to discuss everything from poetry to politics, all while sipping thick, sweetened coffee served in small, delicate cups. But coffee here is more than just a stimulant, it's a symbol of hospitality. Inviting a guest to share coffee is a gesture of friendship and respect. And you'll notice that every cup is meticulously prepared, often infused with spices like cinnamon or cloves to add warmth and complexity. The quirky detail? In some Cairo coffee houses, fortune-telling from coffee grounds tasseography is a popular pastime. Patrons swirl their cups, then flip them over, interpreting the shapes and patterns left behind. Some say it's more entertainment than truth, but you can't help feeling a little curious about your own fortune. Historians still argue whether these coffee houses were centers of political dissent or simply places where ideas fermented quietly beneath layers of smoke and conversation. It's safe to say both are true, depending on the day and the clientele. You take a seat beside a storyteller weaving tales of desert caravans and ancient kings, his voice soft but captivating. Around you, others debate poetry, religion, and the latest news from faraway lands. The coffee arrives, dark and thick, its surface shimmering with a thin layer of foam called kishar. You sip slowly, savoring the bittersweet flavor and the comforting warmth spreading through your chest. Nearby, a group plays senet, an ancient board game with roots as old as the pyramids, while a cat curls up on a low table, purring softly. You notice the intricate designs on the brass coffee pot, a work of art in itself. It's clear that coffee here isn't just about taste, but about ritual and presentation. As the sun begins to set behind the minarets, casting long shadows across the city, you feel a peacefulness settle over you. The world slows down, marked by the gentle clinking of cups and the murmur of quiet conversation. And as you prepare to leave, the storyteller offers a final thought. In Cairo, coffee isn't just a drink. It's a thread connecting past and present, people and stories, a gentle reminder that even in the busiest places, there's space to pause and savor. You nod, feeling that truth settle warmly inside you. Leaving the warm, spice-scented streets of Cairo behind, you find yourself in Edo period Japan, where coffee is almost unheard of, but relaxation and ritual are very much alive. The year is early 18th century, and while the rest of the world buzzes over this new bean, Japan remains a land devoted to tea, the green, powdered, meditative kind. You wander along wooden streets lined with paper lanterns and sliding shoshi doors. The air is crisp, the distant sound of a koto string vibrating somewhere in a tea house, and the scent of charcoal mingled with incense. Here's your mainstream fact. The Japanese tea ceremony, or chanayu, is a centuries-old ritual designed to bring peace, mindfulness, and social harmony through carefully prepared powdered green tea called matcha. It's an art form, a philosophy, and a quiet dance of movements that can stretch for hours. Coffee hasn't yet arrived, but you can almost imagine what would happen if it did. A Japanese would probably find a way to turn it into a Zen practice, or at least a performance with exquisite attention to detail. The quirky detail? In this era, some wealthy merchants and artists practiced hibernation therapy, essentially resting deeply through long winter months by wrapping themselves in multiple layers of silk and fur and sleeping for days at a time. A practice thought to preserve vitality. Not exactly your typical nap, but hey, who are you to judge? Historians still argue whether such long winter rests were actually healthful or just clever ways to avoid social obligations. Either way, they seem like an ancient form of self-care, albeit a very cozy one. Back in the tea house, you watch a group perform the ritual. The host slowly and precisely prepares the matcha, whisking the powdered leaves into a creamy foam. Every gesture is deliberate. Every breath is part of the moment. The tea is served in simple, rustic bowls, each one handmade and unique, embodying the beauty of imperfection. You sip, feeling the earthy bitterness balanced by a subtle sweetness, the warmth spreading through you like a quiet wave. Outside, cherry blossoms begin to fall, their petals drifting like gentle snow. The world feels softer here, quieter. No rush, no loud debates or political schemes, just a shared moment of calm. Though coffee is absent, the culture's reverence for ritual and relaxation reminds you that sometimes the slowest moments are the richest. You notice an elderly man seated alone, meditating with his eyes closed, a faint smile playing on his lips. You wonder if he's dreaming of foreign beans and smoky cafes or simply savoring the present. Whatever the answer, you feel yourself easing deeper into calm, the gentle cadence of the tea ceremony carrying you forward. From the serene tea houses of Edo, Japan, you drift into the sprawling streets of 19th century New Orleans, a city pulsing with music, mystery, and a unique blend of cultures. The air is thick with humidity, the scent of magnolia and gumbo mingling as riverboats chug lazily along the Mississippi. Here, coffee isn't just a drink. It's a cornerstone of social life, and it often arrives with a surprising twist. Your mainstream fact. New Orleans is credited with popularizing café au lait, a creamy concoction of strong coffee and hot milk, often served alongside bayonet square pillows of fried dough dusted heavily with powdered sugar. French influence is everywhere, from the architecture to the language to the coffee. But here's the quirky twist. Due to coffee shortages during the Civil War, local vendors began mixing chicory root into their coffee to stretch it further. This gave New Orleans coffee its distinct, slightly smoky flavor, a tradition that remains beloved today. Historians still argue whether chicory was initially added out of necessity or preference, but its legacy is undeniable. It's now a signature, part of the city's caffeine culture, something no visitor can resist. You find yourself in a small cafe near the French Quarter, where the walls are adorned with faded photographs and old jazz posters. A street musician plays a soft trumpet tune nearby, the notes curling through the warm air like smoke. You take a sip of your café au lait, the smooth blend of coffee and milk washing over your tongue, followed by the sweet crunch of a bayonet. Its comfort in edible form. Around you, conversations weave between English, French, and Creole, a tapestry of voices telling stories, making plans, and sharing laughs. The cafe is a crossroads where cultures meet, mingle, and create something new. You notice a group playing dominoes at a corner table, their laughter punctuated by the clacking of tiles. A woman with a wide-brimmed hat chats with a young poet about the city's haunted history. while a waiter deftly carries trays stacked high with steaming drinks. Outside, the humid evening deepens, lanterns flickering as fireflies begin their dance. The city's pulse slows, but the warmth of shared moments lingers. You think back to the quiet tea rituals of Japan and the bustling markets of Cairo. Coffee here is louder, more playful, wrapped in layers of history and flavor that make it impossible to resist. And as the night deepens, you feel the gentle buzz of caffeine and culture wrapping around you like a soft, familiar blanket. The world is wide, and coffee's many stories are yours to explore. One sip at a time, you find yourself stepping into the muted dawn of 19th century Istanbul, the air still cool and fragrant with hints of jasmine and freshly baked simit. The city is a vibrant crossroads of continents, and coffee here isn't just a beverage, it's a ceremony, a social ritual woven deeply into the Ottoman way of life. The sound of copper sezes, those small, long-handled pots, clinking together in bustling coffeehouses, echoes through narrow alleys as men gather to play backgammon, share poetry, and engage in quiet debates. Your mainstream fact: Ottoman coffeehouses, known as cafés, became centers of social and intellectual life. From the 16th century onward, places where news traveled fast and stories grew tall. These venues were so influential that the Sultan at times saw them as hotbeds of dissent and even temporarily banned coffeehouses on several occasions. A quirky detail? Turkish coffee is traditionally brewed very finely, leaving a thick sediment at the bottom of the cup that's often used for tasseography, reading fortunes in the leftover grounds, similar to what you saw in Cairo. But with distinctly Turkish flair, historians still argue whether these coffeehouses primarily fostered political intrigue or simply offered a welcoming space for relaxation and conversation in an otherwise strict society. You take a slow sip from your tiny porcelain cup, savoring the rich, strong brew that leaves a bittersweet kiss on your tongue. The thick foam atop the coffee feels almost like a delicate hat balancing on your lips. Around you, a group debates poetry and philosophy, their voices low but passionate. The air is heavy with tobacco smoke and the sweet scent of rosewater from nearby pastries. You notice a storyteller weaving tales of sultans and soldiers, his gestures fluid and expressive. Nearby, a young couple exchanges shy glances over their steaming cups. Outside, the city wakes fully to the call of the muezzin, mingling with the chatter from the coffeehouses, a symphony of the ancient and the everyday. You reflect on the remarkable journey of coffee from mysterious beans in distant lands to the heartbeat of a city straddling two continents. Each sip here connects you not just to the present moment, but to centuries of shared stories and whispered secrets. The day warms, the city hums, and you feel part of a timeless tradition, a gentle pulse that continues to beat quietly beneath the surface of history. From the spirited streets of Istanbul, you drift across the Atlantic to 19th century Havana, where the Caribbean sun glints off turquoise waters and the scent of roasted coffee beans mingles with the sea breeze. Cuba is a place alive with rhythm, color, and a coffee culture that's just as rich and layered as the island itself. Your mainstream fact: coffee cultivation flourished in Cuba during the 1800s, becoming a significant part of the economy and daily life. The island's fertile volcanic soil and tropical climate created perfect conditions for growing some of the world's finest Arabica beans. In Havana's bustling cafes, coffee is often enjoyed con leche, strong espresso combined with sweetened condensed milk, a tradition born from necessity during times when fresh milk was scarce but sweetness was never sacrificed. A quirky tidbit? Cuban coffee culture gave rise to the cafecito, a tiny, potent espresso shot served in small cups, often shared with friends as a social ritual. It's so strong it's sometimes called the little rocket, enough to wake the sleepiest soul, or send you bouncing off the walls. Historians still debate whether the Cuban cafecito's popularity was purely about flavor or more about fostering close-knit social bonds in a city alive with music, politics, and revolution. You sit at a cafe overlooking the harbor, the hum of salsa music drifting from a nearby street corner. Your cup arrives, dark and sweet, the aroma almost intoxicating. You take a slow sip, feeling the bold flavor ignite. A quiet fire inside you. Around you, locals chat animatedly, gesturing wildly and laughing heartily. A group of musicians tunes their instruments, preparing to fill the afternoon with lively tunes. You watch as an elderly man carefully stirs his coffee, the sugar crystals dissolving into the dark liquid like tiny stars fading into night. The cafe's worn wooden tables hold countless stories of secret meetings, chance encounters, and everyday joys. The sun warms your face as you lean back and listen to the city's pulse laughter. Music, the clinking of cups all blending into a gentle symphony. As you finish your cafecito, you marvel at how coffee's journey has traveled so far, transforming itself in every culture it touches, always adapting, always inviting connection. Now, with the taste of Havana's sweet, strong brew lingering, you feel ready to carry a little of that warmth with you wherever you go. Your final stop brings you to the quiet, fog-draped streets of Victorian London, where the hustle and bustle of the Industrial Revolution hum in the background and the comforting aroma of coffee offers a rare moment of calm amid the chaos. The year is 1885, and coffee houses here are evolving into places of both leisure and work, a mainstream fact. By this time, London's coffee houses had become popular spots not only for drinking, but also for conducting business, reading newspapers, and socializing. They were essential in shaping public opinion and providing spaces for intellectual exchange during a time of rapid social change. Here's a quirky detail. Victorian coffee houses often featured coffee gardens, outdoor spaces where patrons could enjoy their drinks among lush plants and soothing fountains, an early form of urban green space designed to help city dwellers relax and escape soot and smog. Historians still debate whether these coffee gardens were genuine attempts at improving public health or clever marketing ploys by coffeehouse owners eager to attract more customers. Either way, the idea of sipping coffee surrounded by nature in a smoky, industrial city is oddly charming. You find yourself seated beneath a wrought iron gazebo, leaves rustling gently overhead as a faint drizzle softens the city noise. Your cup of black coffee is strong but smooth, offering a gentle contrast to the damp chill in the air. Nearby, gentlemen in bowler hats and women in lace gloves discuss everything from politics to literature, their voices low and thoughtful. A newsboy hawks the latest edition of the Times, while a street musician plays a melancholy tune on a violin. You notice an old wooden table etched with decades of initials, and doodles a testament to countless conversations, agreements, and perhaps a few broken hearts. As you sip, you recall earlier stops on your journey, the quiet tea ceremonies in Japan, the spirited cafecitos of Havana, the lively bazaars of Cairo. Each place has offered a unique way to slow down, savor, and connect. Now, in this misty London garden, you feel the soothing weight of history settling around you, the steady rhythm of past lives echoing softly. Coffee warms your hands and your thoughts as the day drifts quietly toward evening. Outside, gas lamps flicker on, casting pools of golden light through the mist. You take one last slow sip, letting the bittersweet flavor linger. A perfect end to a long, winding journey through centuries and continents. And as you prepare to rest, remember history, like coffee, is best savored slowly, one gentle sip at a time.